Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your patience as we made sure to allow the panelists to enter first. So we appreciate that. Welcome to today's special event co-hosted by the Black Bookstore Collective. We are over the moon excited about today's event. Co-hosted by a total of 13 Black booksellers. I'm going to name them: Afriware Books Company, Beyond Barcodes Bookstore, Bingham's Books and Culture, Black World Schoolers Mobile Bookstore, Cafe Con Libros, Community Book Center, The Book Joint, Liberation Station Bookstore, Mahogany Books, More Books LLC, SOA Company Books, Turning Page Bookshop, Wow Book and Toy Store. And my name is Nzinga Nomo, the owner of Afriware Books Company, in business since 1993. And we are proud to provide a platform for authors, artists, and advocates to share, to give us a sense of cultural pride by sharing their experiences. So what a time is this, right, in the nation. We do have Black booksellers to thank when the nation started making that turn in consciousness to ask more questions about the Black experience. And Black booksellers are definitely to thank for keeping, in some cases, banned books out of banned book status by keeping them in circulation. So we absolutely appreciate those of you on the call who understand the importance of that support. We, the Black Bookstore Collective, want to start by thanking Hearst Magazine and the two Nicoles who are on the call today for first reaching out to me and being open to the wider audience that the Black Bookstore Collective provides. We also want to thank the great Oprah Winfrey, who not only wrote the foreword to this wonderful book, but also provides a link on her powerful platform to all of our bookstores. That was a bold move that we greatly appreciate. So today's event is going to go something like this. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the book. We're going to skim a few of the pages. We have 4 esteemed guests on today's call that are going to share their experiences. Now, to make sure that everyone gets a chance to answer the questions, I'm going to first introduce the panelists. I will ask the question, and all three panelists will answer the questions, and those panelists are the ones who were interviewed in the book, and the last panelist was one of the interviewers in the book. So at about half an hour in, we're going to pause and see if there's any questions in the chat. So while they're speaking, feel free to write your question down, and our wonderful producer, Jeff Johnson, who, there he is going to be reading your question, and then you can address your question either directly to a specific panelist or to all 4 of the panelists. If the questions have been exhausted, then we're going to go back, and we have, of course, a lot more questions to ask. And then we're going to finish up in about an hour. Okay, so let us get started. We're going to start by showing you a glimpse of this keepsake. Oh, masterpiece of a work. I'm so excited about it. Let me make sure I can share my screen here. I see that I can. I've got to show this to you. Okay, there we go, sharing the screen. Okay. So let's see, for some reason I cannot see. Oh, here we go. I need to, there we go. Okay, so this beautiful coffee table, full color book it's just a work of art. And I'm gonna just scroll through it slowly so that you can see some of the pages. But while I'm scrolling, I want to just share with you what went into this huge undertaking. Over 50 elders were interviewed for this book by not one reporter. And by the way, the elders are 75 and over, okay? A very special group. The reporters who interviewed them were selected as beginning their careers. You see, what a wonderful experience to have. And there were 47 reporters to interview the over 50 elders. Supporting that process were 32 photographers. So this was well thought out and such a great match. And you see here, Nicole Hannah-Jones has done the introduction, and you've, I'm sure, heard about her work from the 1619 project, which was mentioned so many times in the Ketanji Brown Jackson Supreme Court hearings. Let me just show you some, look at this photography. I mean, this is the kind of thing when you take it home, when you purchase it from one of your local Black bookseller, you can just open to any page and get the richness, the wisdom from these elders. It is just really, really, to me, it's so important to examine our victories, to cherish our accomplishments, and to borrow a term from the young people, which is trauma porn. You know, the mainstream media can take care of that part, right? Every day they're taking care of that part, the worst there is. Let us focus on the best. Why? So we can repeat it and build on it and improve on it. So, okay, so I think I've given you a nice little sneak peek, hopefully enough to pique the interest. And I'm going to give the screen share back to Jeff. And let me move my, all this technology. I'm gonna move my co-host back to Jeff so he can let in any other guests. And we are gonna start the interview process here. Okay. So again, we have 4 panelists. We're gonna do 3 panelists with the same questions, and the last panelist will get a separate question. The first panelist, well, let me give the question first. The first question is, please flesh out one of the defining moments in your life where you had to decide whether to follow the crowd or create a new path of your own. I'm sure each of us has that moment in time where it's like, nah, I'm not gonna go that way. And so our first panelist is Vivian Penn. Okay, she is the first director at 81 years old now, first director of the Office of Research on Women's Health, out of Washington, D.C. She was the only Black person and the only woman to graduate from her medical school class. Amazing to me. Amazing to me. I remember being the only Black person like in my school classroom, but you're talking about to graduate. That's all those years. Amazing. We can't wait to hear from you. She's also the first Black woman to chair an academic pathology department in the US at Howard University. Please, please share your thoughts on the first question, fleshing out that defining moment in your life.
Thank you. And as I thought about my life, I think there are actually two defining moments. One was one you referred to, and that was the day that I started medical school at the University of Virginia in a town, Charlottesville, that was just beginning to desegregate. It still basically was segregated at a university that was not admitting many Blacks anywhere and not admitting women to its undergraduate schools. And to come into class the first day and discover that I was in a class of all white men, it was just me as the only woman, the only person of color. And should I stay and face that tough academic curriculum and try to get through 4 years in that setting, or should I just walk out the door? Well, I didn't walk out, but I'm going to jump ahead to the other major time, which is what really is discussed in the book. And that is, I was very happy as a full professor, department chair at Howard of pathology, but I had been chair of pathology for about 9 years and was thinking maybe I should do something different when I was at a meeting at the NIH, and Dr. Bernadine Healy, who was the first woman, in fact, the only woman to serve as director of NIH, and whom I had known because I had actually taught her when she was a medical student at Harvard, said to me, "We have this new Office of Research on Women's Health. I need you to come and lead this office." And I said, "No, I can't go into government. I like to say what I think. I'd never survive." And she, which is what I really thought. And then she said, "No, I want you to think about it. I want you to come." And she gave me a week to make my mind up. And when I thought about it, my career had really gone into research. I had been very concerned because we didn't at that time see many of us included in clinical studies. And for example, when decisions were made, like related to breast cancer, mammograms, other things, we wanted to know, were we included in the studies? And yet we weren't. And this new office was set up to ensure the inclusion of women and minorities in clinical research studies. In addition, it wasn't a minority office, it was an office of research on women's health. And I saw that I maybe would have the opportunity to make sure that this was not an office whose programs were directed to just some women, but to make sure that our programs in that office would be inclusive of all women, including women of color. And I made that part of our mission statement. I had maybe, and to keep this brief, I had maybe two areas that I had to contend with. One, having to convince the medical establishment and the scientists and the naysayers that this was not an office that was just going to be politically correct, that it really was science-based, and to really reach out to women and people of color, to have them understand the importance of participating in clinical studies so that we could increase that, which was the mission of our office. And the second was to be in an office that was directed to all women. There were certain segments who were not happy that a Black woman was leading an office. It's fine if you're leading an office of minority events or if you're leading an office of Black programs, but there were some who really never could fully accept that a Black woman was leading an office dealing with all women. And for many years during my tenure at NIH, there were efforts to get me fired or to have me replaced. But I kept going, and I must say that I retired after 20 years, but I'm now senior scientist emerita at NIH. And I'm glad that I hung in, because I think, there's always more to do, and everything's not perfect. But I really think I made sure that women of color are included in all of the programs addressing women. And I think I'm very proud and pleased about that. And I'll stop at that.
Whoa. That was a whirlwind, and we thank you, oh my goodness, for your focus and championing what, our inclusion. I know that didn't come easy. I know
No,
that didn't come easy, but you forged ahead anyway, and that takes a certain heart, you know, a certain dedication. And oh, I hope everyone could feel your passion through the screen. So thank you. And let me just say that I do have a little timer going in the background, trying to gauge between 3 to 5 minutes per person. And you were right under 5 minutes. So
Oh,
thank
good.
you so much. And now we're going to have the same question for Faye Waddleton. Let me stop this here. Okay. Faye Waddleton, 78 years old, reproductive rights activist out of New York City, the first Black person to serve as president of Planned Parenthood. Wow. From 1978 to 1992. And in light of today's unsettling possibility of the reversal of Roe v. Wade, we are excited and eager to hear your thoughts on our question. Oh, Faye was not able, I'm sorry. Faye was not able to make it. So, okay. I'm going to move to our next panelist, which is Dorothy Butler Gilliam. Thank you, Nicole. Dorothy Butler Gilliam. She arrived at the Washington Post as the first Black woman ever to be hired as a reporter at the paper. Gilliam served as president of the National Association of Black Journalists from 1993 to 1995. She also has another book called Trailblazer, a pioneering journalist fight to make the media look more like America, which was published in 2019. So would you please answer the question to flesh out one of the defining moments in your life where you had to decide your own path or go with the crowd? Let's see.
Muted.
Mrs. Gilliam's with us, and if she could, maybe her assistant could unmute her device for her.
There.
There she is.
Okay,
Okay,
beautiful, beautiful.
thank you very much. And such a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. Yes, the defining moment when I had to flesh out a different path actually occurred when I, in 1961, when I became the first Black woman reporter at the Washington Post. In 1961, there were probably maybe 4 or 5 Black people working for white dailies. There may have been other women, I don't really know. But when I had worked in the Black press for about 3.5 years and learned so very much, but I always had a dream of being a daily newspaper reporter. And there was only one Black daily newspaper in the country at that point, and that was the Atlanta Daily World. And I had grown up in the segregated South. I had endured all of the hardships of Jim Crow, and I did not want to go back to the South. So I had to decide that if I'm going to be a daily news reporter, I'm going to have to go work in the white press. So one of the things that I did was to attend Columbia University as a way of, getting the training that I needed. And when I finished,
the Black editor of the Washington Post.
Someone needs to mute, please.
and when I finished Columbia University, one of the professors told me, you have a double whammy. You have so many handicaps, you'll probably make it. And so he was saying that my race and my gender were going to be these obstacles that would make it very hard for me, because the media, white media, was heavily dominated by white men. And most of the women, the white women who worked there, were usually marooned in a section called in the case of the Post, for and about women. And so they were really, in general, with few exceptions, they were made to be really just work in society news and news of that sort. And that certainly was far, far from what I was interested in. So as the path I had to flesh out then was, how do I make it in this field that is, you know, very, very difficult for women, and then to be an African-American woman in this field, to not really even have a any desire to do what the white women did, but I wanted to do what the real reporters did. So it was very challenging. I talk about it a lot in the interview, and I talk about it in the book. But one of the things that I knew I wanted to do was to begin to bring the lives of African Americans into the mainstream. This was a time when African Americans were not even considered to be written about in newspapers. This was a time when the editors refused to write about even Black murders. I remember one of the editors said, you know, Black deaths are cheap deaths, you know. So it was a horrible, horrible kind of a barrier that I was just determined to break, because I knew that for us to make progress as a race, we were going to have to move beyond, you know, the limitations and the constraints that had been put upon us, you know, post-slavery. So we had not only endured 246 years of slavery, but another 100 years of Jim Crow. So there were a lot of things I had to flesh out, and I'm sure that you know, each of your panelists will talk about what they did as well. But the real thing, I think, was having the tenacity, having the faith, having the determination to succeed in this, knowing that I had to be making a path that others would follow, and knowing also that to begin to really bring the lives and the activities and history and all of that into the white media was a part of our whole race moving from, you know, limited spaces into larger spaces. And of course, as you know, the 1960s, that was the time when the civil rights movement was kicking into high gear. And you know, Dr. Martin Luther King was telling young people like me to, you know, go into these white corporations where we've been excluded and make a difference. So there were many challenges that I had to face. And these included, of course, many what we today would call microaggressions, macroaggressions, but at the same time, you know, that determination to succeed was part of the way I fleshed out the path, and to know that if I succeeded, then it was going to be easier for the next person. If I did not, it was going to be a barrier. And that was one of the reasons that I spent so much of my career bringing other minority journalists into media, so that we could become a part of the larger society. And that is, you know, that was part of our goals and during those early days in the 1960s, etc.
Oh my, oh my, that was stirring. I, as you were speaking, I just thought about how many different times you had to choose to hold your tongue versus lashing out, because I know you had the vocabulary to do so, but deciding to, you know, pick your battles. Oh, my, thank you for your service, right? For your determination, your decision that this was the path you were going to take, and it almost sounds like by any means necessary, that is what you decided to do. And
And
that's,
that was very much in the Black tradition of
yes,
not just doing things for ourselves, but to also think about the larger group. You know, that was part of the tradition in which I grew up, and I think so many other African Americans grew up as well.
absolutely. Oh, I appreciate your saying that, pointing that out, because so much negativity is attributed to us, and there's so much to embrace. And thank you again. Yes, that is a rich tradition. That's the only reason why we're all here, because someone before us felt that way and sacrificed. And okay, I'm so excited. All right, so I'm making a mental note, and please feel free to hold me to this. Since one of our panelists is not here, that gives every panelist a little bit more time. So we might get a few more questions in. Okay, so our next panelist is actually the one of, okay, let me give you the exact number, one of the 47 reporters who took part out in this project, and that is Michelle Curry. And we have a little different question for her. Let me make sure I have my notes here. I'm like nervous because everyone on here is just has such a high standard of excellence. I'm trying to meet our guests where they are. Okay, so Michelle Curry is a recent journalism graduate of Emerson College and editorial assistant at Hearst Magazines. She's also contributed to Men's Health and more. And let me say that for any of the panelists, if there is an area that I have not mentioned in my intro that you would like to embellish or that I left off, feel free. It's okay to, what you may think is bragging, it's okay, right? Because when it's true, it's not bragging anyway. So do not be shy at all. And it doesn't sound like any of you could afford to be shy based on your trailblazing careers. Okay, so my question where did I put my question? Oh, okay. Where Miss Curry is not on my screen right now. I'm gonna try to, oh, there she is. Okay. So my question is, after participating in this wonderful project, interviewing these elders, is there some advice you would like to give to those in your generation about your experience, what you learned?
Yeah, so well, first, thank you for having me. And second, just to clarify, my name is Melanie, not Michelle, but it's okay.
Thank you.
It's okay. We all have the same
Sorry
experience. I go
about
back.
that.
It's totally
Sorry
okay.
about that. That's not okay. Okay.
Yeah, so my name is Melanie. And to answer your question, I think there's a lot of things, like Mr. B said, that we kind of learn from our parents, growing up. And I think, just being a part of this project has really, kind of solidified those stories my family would tell me as a child. My grandmother was the first to ever graduate high school, the first ever to graduate college, and then the first ever to get a master's degree. And, we were like, oh, well, that's your grandmother. That wasn't that long ago. I'm like, that was probably in the 70s, right? And so she was doing that while raising 4 children, one of which was my mom, right? So, we didn't have generational wealth, we didn't have the kind of financial literacy to even put me in college, right? And, I have to kind of like climb my way through. And so one thing that, this project really solidified is tenacity. Unfortunately, as Black Americans, we don't have the resources other white Americans have, right? My mom didn't know what like a credit score was, right? She didn't know how to pay for college. She wasn't taught these things because her mom wasn't taught these things. And we kind of have to learn through experiences, and it's hard. It can be really hard. It can be really frustrating, especially if we're dealing with other racial trauma and racial stressors that are going on in our local and national community. So I think this kind of, again, this project, learning the environments in which elders in our community grew up and how they still kind of like persevered, has reminded me that, I can't necessarily give up either, right? Because it's not just about me, it's about other people. And, I'm hoping that I can inspire other people, like other people my age, to keep going. Because, y'all, life is hard out here, like look at the things we see in the media, right? And, I know I'm like a media person, but I'm talking the general like news, like seeing all these, like just the Buffalo shooting, that was just like, what, 4 weeks ago?
Yes.
And we're just supposed to act if these things are okay. And it's like, they're not. But, I think what I've learned is just that, like, we can't give up, and, to also take like time and care for ourselves. And that at the end of the day, like, to persevere means also like to check in, to like cry and feel emotions and feel pain and whatnot. That's actually what Vivian told me. I don't know if you remember that, Vivian, but you told me that. That's what Vivian told me. And so, yeah, long story short, to answer your question, really just, feel the emotions and just remind yourself that, the Black community is a community. I know we talk a lot about like what we individually do for, for yourself, but, I don't know how it is in other cultures, but I just know in the Black community, we look out for one another, because who else will, right? The only thing we've ever had was each other, right? Why do you think we're so organized when it comes to social protests, or like why, the church is such a huge home in our lives, or why we connect through food or through music, right? It's because we feel a sense of community, because we know the world is out to get us. And so the only person we can really rely on is each other.
So well said. And while you were speaking, I couldn't help but remember we're in a pandemic, right? That's one of these layers that you're talking about, that we're having to somehow work our way through and keep our sanity and still striving. That's no small potato right there. And yeah, it's a miracle, and we're still here. We have our wits about us.
Yeah, and just like, not to cut you off, but during the pandemic, there was those, the George Floyd protests. Like, these are things we can't just like forget. They may not be in our face all the time, or we may not be consuming these images of police brutality or just the murders of Black and brown people, but that doesn't mean that we can't feel the impact, or we can't feel the effects. And so I just think like being there for one another, kind of encouraging each other and saying that, like, yes, it's hard, but we got this. Like, look at what our ancestors done. They had nothing, right? They didn't know how to read, they didn't know how to write, right? They didn't know anything, right? And look where they are. Look at my grandmother, it's just, bless her heart, but she didn't know. She was the first in her family to graduate high school. And that meant seeing, not that big to people, but to me it means a lot, because she had a baby when she was 14 and graduated high school, right? And that's just the way it is. And so I'm just so excited just to like hear the stories of other Black elders, because I'm like a very community-based person, so being Black means everything to me.
It's so beautiful. Oh, that touches our hearts. Thank you so much.
And she was a great interviewer, because she did my interview, and she was a great interview. I was very impressed.
Vivian, you're so sweet. Thank you.
Oh, this is so wonderful. Okay, we're going to go to our second question, starting back with Vivian Penn. The second question is going to be, what advice would you give your younger self when faced with adversity?
I guess I'd give myself the advice that I should do what I did, which was to stay firm, keep my goal in mind of what I wanted to do, and not let those challenges take me away from what I really wanted to do, distract me so that I couldn't be successful, that it's worth it. So if my younger self could know that I made it to not only this age, but this stage in my career, I think would be helpful. And I think that's the same advice that I would give younger folks. Take advantage of opportunities when they come, persevere, don't be distracted by those evil or comments that are major challenges and distractions, and keep your eye on your goal.
So no regrets. That's what that sounds like. No regrets.
Well, not really. I regret losing so much sleep over the years, but otherwise.
You've done it. You've done well. You've done well. Thank you. And let's move to Miss Gilliam. Back to Miss Gilliam.
What advice would I give my younger self?
Yes.
Under the circumstances that I was encountering, I think I would give myself, I would advise myself to be kind to myself. Because there's so much pressure that we were constantly under, and that pressure, as much as you try to diminish it, it kind of stays with you. And I think if I would be able to do so, I would say, be kind to yourself, because as I think each of the other guests have indicated, there were a lot of challenges. And when you have those challenges, how do you have them without, somehow, imbibing some of the negativity? And to be able to, accept the challenges, but at the same time, find those ways to not take even what the pain may be, not to take it out on yourself. And I think that sometimes, in trying to cope with pressures, it's easy to kind of slip into behavior that could be harmful or could be negative. But coming into this with that idea of, being kind to yourself, I think would help. Also, in my case, I think, I often say I am who I am because somebody loved me. And I was loved by my father, who was a minister, my mother, who was a minister's wife, my family, my church, so many of the people who were a part of the church, and that whole issue of faith and believing was, in my case, very important to me. I don't think it was something I would have necessarily thought about that way at the time it was occurring, but it just happened. And it's very important, I think, that we just kind of, as we are so proud of our traditions as African American, remember that we still have that obligation for self-care. And I think I would try to underscore that to my younger self.
Oh, that was a warm hug. Thank you so much. Simple and profound. Beautiful. Thank you. Let us go back to Melanie Melanie Curry. Now, Melanie, I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I want you to feel free to not answer the question that I'm about to ask and just share whatever you would like. But it came to me to ask, is there an inspirational quote, right, that you would like to share that has kept you inspired through the years, or whatever you would like to share at this moment?
Ooh, you did put me on the spot.
I'm sorry.
You're okay. I don't think, here's what I always think. I don't think there's a like any sort of quote I remember, but I do have memories that kind of like hold me through, because I feel like memories are something a little bit more intimate and a little bit more personal. So like some memories I have are like this project, right? And just I think for one, the email that I got when being invited to this, I think that was a huge memory to me, because I contributed to this project before I even had graduated college. And I just think that is that me in the background?
No,
It's,
someone.
oh, okay, that's fine. I was like, it's but like I was saying, I think me contributing to this project, knowing that someone saw potential in me, when, like the other guests have said, it's hard to kind of find or remember the potential in yourself, just because you have so many people who are never on your side, right? And I can't compare it to, again, what Miss Penn or Miss Gilliam has been through. But I know at my college, I was the first not the first, but the only Black person at the school newspaper, the only Black person in classes, and the only Black person saying, hey, we shouldn't describe, this Black person in the story as like ghetto or any sort of like negative like stereotype or caricature, and so it's really hard to kind of like educate your students and your teachers while you're supposed to be being educated. And it's hard growing up as a young Black woman, where unfortunately, as it may be, my mom can't protect me from racism, right? And my mom can't, like, she can tell me, well, this is the way the world is, but it's, it's a very different experience when someone tells you and then you experience it yourself. And so that all being said is that I remember just events in my life, right? When, my mom hugging me as I graduated. This is like, maybe this is like an old memory for me, because I'm so young, but when President Obama became, when he became president, I was only 8 years old. Sorry to show my age, but I remember that. I think for me, it was also, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and Stacey Abrams, one of my favorite, politicians, when she lost, that was a huge thing for me. When Trump won, that was a huge thing for me. And just seeing the kind of the small wins over time and the small losses too, because you can't forget those, whether that's in my personal life or that's like external, and that had nothing to do with me. I think the first time I voted, that was very powerful for me, because I knew it wasn't just me who was voting, but all the people who fought for me to vote. Oh my God, it's gonna make me cry. So that all to say, I don't have a memorable quote. I just have memories and these kind of like small little reminders of where, I'm just like small little reminders of like people in my life or people I don't even know that are kind of like showing me like, you got this, right? Because it's hard, we, like Dorothy said, you got to learn how to be kind to yourself. But learning how to be kind to yourself when the world isn't kind to you, that's a lesson I'm still trying to learn.
We all are, believe me. It's never licked completely, but yeah, you let some just slide off you and some may take a little more time. Oh, I'm thankful to you for letting me surprise you with a question, but I'm more thankful that you felt comfortable enough to share those beautiful, beautiful memories. I think that's a habit, that others might want to pick up to stay encouraged, through the madness, right? Through the madness.
Yeah. I also feel like, there's just something about words that I can't always remember, but I can remember feelings. And feelings, say a lot more, or, say a lot more than a word ever could, or, someone ever could say to you. And I just think that there are certain feelings that like, where I prove, the racist people at my school wrong, and I didn't have to yell at them or scream at them, but my actions show like, I'm really like grateful for where I am, coming from a single Black household with a mom, who didn't have the necessary skills, to be successful in life because her mom didn't really know. And, you know, I'm just really proud and thankful.
So wonderful. That mindset will, you can, the sky. No, there's no boundary. No boundary. I'm noticing that Jeff is off camera, so I think that means he paused for a moment. So I'm going to take this opportunity to remind anyone who has a question to please put it in the chat. Jeff will be reading from the chat, asking the panelists or panelists their questions. And I also want to take a moment to list the bookstores that are part of the Black Bookstore Collective. We formed shortly after the murder of George Floyd out of a desire to make big moves as one. We knew that we would have an even bigger impact on everything. And it's just been a joy really to get to know these booksellers better. We meet maybe every other week or so, and we really get into the details. It's just a joy to share that level of experience with everyone. So those bookstores again are Afriware Books Company, Beyond Barcodes Bookstore, Bingham's Books and Culture, Black World Schoolers Mobile Bookstore, Cafe Con Libros, Community Book Center, The Book Joint, Liberation Station Bookstore, Mahogany Books, More Books, SOA Company Books, Turning Page Bookshop, and Wow Book and Toy Store. Also, I'm gonna pause here. This is like the commercial segment. So our next, by the way, the collective is over 100 of us around the country. And so we send out an email and we ask who would like to participate, and you know, it varies. So our next event is actually next Tuesday, and we certainly invite everyone on this call. We wanted to share this event as well. We have a children's author named Aaliyah Agostini, and she wrote a book called The Juneteen Story. So it's very timely and it's a beautifully illustrated book. That's going to be at 6 o'clock Central Time. And for sure you can go to one of the bookstores who invited you here, or Afriware Books. We have an events tab that you can go to at the top of our website. So Jeff, let me just ask, are you?
Miss Nzinga,
Perfect.
so I'm still with you, but I think I'm gonna need you to check the chats if you can.
Okay, all right. No
And read
problem.
off the questions that are in there. We've had a couple of affirmations, but I can't see them at the moment.
Okay, no problem. This is how we work it out. All right, let me see if I can scroll to the top here. Okay.
Might I make a comment while you're looking for questions?
Please, that would be awesome.
I especially appreciated what Dorothy Gilliam said. And by the way, I'm a fan of hers living in Washington, seeing the Washington Post every day. I would always look for her articles in her column, and I'm delighted to be on with her. But one of the things that she mentioned was the support of family. I think that's so important for us as African Americans, our families and support for families. I know if it were not for my family, I would never have made it through all the things that I did, not only with providing me with support, but encouragement. And when I was really beat down, having a little empathy and then saying, get up and go back and do what you want to do. But also to point out that, you know, so often we see young people who don't have that family support, and how important it is when we identify those young people who don't have family support of their own, that we reach out to them and give them some support and some love, and wrap them with the kind of hug and encouragement they need. I think now we called it advising, we called it supporting. These days it's called mentoring and allyship and all these different terms, but it comes down to being kind and supportive and advising others. And I think I've spent so much of my career mentoring others because I had no real mentors. I really had family. So I think it's important not only to recognize the strength of our families and recognizing that and carrying that with us, but also reaching out to those who don't have that strong family support to provide it to them and give them that guidance and love they need. I just wanted to add that because when Dorothy said that, it just struck me that I had mentioned family and thinking how important that was, and then thinking about so many that I've seen who didn't have the kind of family support. And I don't mean financial, I mean just in terms of encouragement and being there to support what they want to do. So thank you for letting me get that little bit of message in.
Oh, that was so timely and such a great segue actually to the chat where my mother, okay, my 84-year-old mother is then, you know, a wonderful support when I decided, oh, I'm gonna quit my corporate, good paying corporate job and become a bookseller. She's like, oh, you can do it. And here she is in the chat. There's a number of comments. And then there's a question. So one of the comments is regarding Hannah Jones, Spirit and Strength, jumping through the screen. This is an amazing story. Overcoming race and gender barriers in those years was so awesome. When a young person holds the elders in high regard and wants her generation to learn from them. I like Miss Penn saying, be kind to yourself amidst negativity. I'm thinking I'd like to read a book, Melanie writes. It's interesting hearing her thoughts. Be kind even when the world is not kind to you. That's powerful. Okay, here we go. Please ask Miss Penn and Miss Gilliam the secret to longevity. They don't appear to be or talk like they're over 65. And let me just say a moment to everyone listening now. We're going to go for another about 10 minutes. Okay, before we wrap things up. Okay, please, please
I'll
share.
give that to Dorothy.
I think you'd be the perfect person to answer it.
Well, it comes down to essentially what she said about being kind to yourself. It comes down to while you're taking care of everybody else, try to take care of yourself. And I sort of feel that I worked so much and was so involved in my work, and I did up until I was 70 before I actually retired. And I'm supposed to be retired now, but like I had 7 Zoom calls and 2 speeches this week. That's not exactly retirement. So I think if you're really active and keeping involved in what you enjoy doing, whether it's the kind of thing I'm doing, whether it's sports or whether it's golfing, or whether it's knitting or whether it's reading, which I do all the time, that it's almost like being in a state of suspended animation, and you're old before you know it. I don't think I really thought about ever being 81 years old, and yet I'm 81. I don't think I can run on the tennis court like I once could, but my mind keeps going, and I do my crosswords every day, but I try to stay on top of things. But it comes back to my advice to others is remember that women, and especially African-American women, are always so busy taking care of everybody else that you've got to remember to take care of the caregiver. That means yourself. And I think Dorothy referred to being kind to yourself. That's so important. And I tell people all the time who are burdened with all the people and things they're taking care of, that if they don't look out for themselves, then they can't take care of everybody else. So other than that, I don't know, I think maybe I've just been a cocoon working so long that all of a sudden it's catching up with me. But I am delighted and as surprised, if not more surprised than anyone, to realize that I'm over 80. I don't think I ever thought about what that meant until I got here.
Amazing, amazing. Whew. Miss Gilliam, would you like to add anything?
Not really. I think I'd like to go to one of the other questions that you had sent me that you asked. Do you remember?
Well, the next, other than the accomplishment, is that the one you're referring to? The accomplishment you're most proud of?
I think you asked what was the most important accomplishment.
Yes.
That we had to, that we were most proud of. What was the
Yes.
accomplishment that you were most proud of?
Yes.
And I did want to mention that And the accomplishment I'm most proud of was really done in concert with about 7 or 8 other people. And that in the middle of, the nation, trying, this was in the, mid-70s, mid to late 70s, in the midst of the nation, still dragging its feet, but making some progress in terms of racial equality. A group of us knew that we had to find a way to train more minorities to enter the media. And so we came together and we started an organization called the Institute for Journalism Education. And we started a summer program, which met initially in some of the schools and universities that were closed during the summer. Our first class was held at the University of California in Berkeley. And we usually had 10 to 12 people. And we were able, in an 11-week intensive course, to prepare them to go to work for small daily newspapers. And that program was renamed for, I think, one of the major movers. His name was Robert C. Maynard. He died prematurely in the 90s. And so we named the program after him. It's now called the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education. And this organization has been driving diversity for 40 years. It's still going on. I sit on the board, but the real movers and shakers, I'm not one of them. They continue to, really push for continuing diversity in the media. And so I think the fact that we have brought, hundreds of journalists of color into the media through the organization now called the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education, I think is just remarkable. And as I said, I was just one of the 7 or 8. I think there were 8 of us, it's when we talk about trying to make the media look more like America, of course, media is very different now. We still have our, the daily newspapers, and we still have, traditional news on television and many things on television as well. But this was a time when there just were not that many Blacks who were working on newspapers at all. And so the fact that we were able to do that, and the fact that this organization still exists and still trying to, to push that envelope, to me is an accomplishment, not that I made, but an accomplishment that I was involved in making. And I'm really very, very, very thankful for that. And once again, as I said, it's part of what I think all of your panelists have said tonight. The idea that, we have to help each other. Each one has to teach one, each one has to help each other. And when we don't do that, that's when we suffer, our race suffers, because it shows that, we are so involved in selfish things that we're not thinking about the big picture. Yes. And so I really just wanted to put that in, because I think it's indicative of, what are the kinds of things that can be done to make a difference in this world. In my case, it was journalism, in the rich history that we just heard from our other panelists is just very, very impressive. But it's, to me, it just underscores that the fact that we, as a people, we are going to survive. We're going to make it despite all of the negativity about us and about all the issues that really try to erode our confidence. And I guess the last thing, since the time is passing quickly, one of the questions was about, what would I advise young people today? One thing I would advise them to do is to be careful about social media. I would advise them to read books, go into these Black bookstores, get books, read the things that help to form you. Those things give you, the information, but also the strength and the fortitude. I'm not going to say everything about social media is bad or either, as we know, many people still find, too much negativity in the media. But it's important for our young people to really begin to shape themselves, to have a strength of that has them certain of who they are and what it means to be a citizen and what are the responsibilities, and just taking what they have and making the most of it. So I really would like to advise them to to read, to go beyond. If they're in a high school where they're not being taught civics and other things that they need, go to the library and find books and read it, and certainly go to the Black bookstores, but do those things that really strengthen you. Don't get caught up too much in that whole social media maelstrom, because it can be not only harmful. So much of what you read is not true, and so much of the time that young people have is spent with social media, but it's not doing the developmental work that would come from really reading a more serious work. So thank you.
Oh my, thank you. And as we close out, I'm going to ask Vivian and Mel to share anything that you would like to, it can either be from the questions that I've sent or something you may have wanted to share before. Just closing thoughts. And I want to also mention there's one more question specifically for Melanie to consider answering. What is your goal? What is your goal?
What do you want to be when you grow up, essentially?
Right.
Oh, is your goal to be an author or something else? That's what it was. Okay. Thank you, Mom.
All right,
Thank you, sister, for being on the call. Okay.
I think I just have two points I'll make, to be brief. One, you've talked about the book. I must say, when I looked through that book, and I still haven't read everything in it because there's so much information in, but it is such a beautiful book. And for young people and for not so young people, just reading about the individuals and what they've accomplished or what they've overcome. There are a number of people in that book that I know or have known and had no idea of the things they faced along their way, which were detailed in the book. So the book is such an inspirational tome. I've already given several copies as gifts to friends and colleagues, and I've had people who come in, including my visiting nurse, who got so stuck on reading the book, I had to remind him he was here to take care of me, not read the book. I'm going to surprise him with a copy. The final thing I'll say is, I speak often to groups of younger students as well as to those who are professionals. But my key phrase and sort of my pin pearl of wisdom is, look beyond your dreams. Don't give up on your dreams. Reach for the stars and take opportunities that you might never have dreamed of before, because if you don't go for them, you'll never know whether or not you would have reached them. So if you reach for the stars and keep that in mind, help to keep you out of the mud at your feet. That's it. That's my closing comment.
Thank you. Ooh, that was plenty food for thought. Thank you.
I don't know how I'm gonna top that. She has some
No,
pretty
no
big.
competition. There's no competition. Everybody's awesome.
Yeah. But to answer the question, what do I really want to be in life? I don't know. I mean, to explain my role a little bit more, I'm a writer, so I write for different brands. Oprah Daily, Cosmopolitan. I'm more of like a magazine s type of person. But I think my whole entire goal, honestly, if I have to say for a professional goal, is to kind of just, I think we all said like kind of share Black stories. I think for me is that when we look at stories in the media, I don't think people understand is that it always has some sort of tie to like Blackness. It's just that no one's talking about it, right? There's so many things I saw growing up that no one ever talked about, right? And I think, it's like kind of like my responsibility to talk about it, not all the time, but majority of the time, right? And that doesn't mean talking about like Black trauma, it can celebrate, Black stories and about like, for instance, like this vegan Black restaurant in New York City, right? It's like the first Black vegan restaurant, that's a huge win, right? And it's like these are just small wins. So essentially, like if I want to say what I want to be, I just want to be someone who talks about Black people, because I love Black people.
I love
I love Black people, always love Black people. I'm pro-Black. There's nothing else to say about how much I love Black people. So yeah, for some closing remarks, I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to talk about my experience with this project. And I think that I'm just really grateful for this opportunity, just not only to like contribute, but also to just hear stories. We all know how unfavorable history books are to us as Black individuals. And sometimes I just think that, it can be hard to think about our past other than, in some sort of like negative way. And I just think learning from the individual people who have shaped, the current society that we all live in, such as, you, Miss Penn, and you, Dorothy, I think it's just important. And so there's no words for me to like share my appreciation. I just hope you guys can feel it. And thank you.
Oh, that is so heartfelt. And thank you, each of the esteemed panelists, Vivian Penn, Faye Waddleton, even though couldn't make it today, Dorothy, Butler, Gilliam, and Melanie Curry at the two Nicoles at Hearst Magazine. We thank you for your dedication and focus to making this such a beautiful, beautiful project. We encourage those on this call to share the news to their friends and family, find a Black bookstore to purchase the book from. We just thank you again for connecting with us on this Thursday night, right? You could have been anywhere, but you were here with us, and we really deeply appreciate you. So thanks again, everyone. Jeff, the producer, I know he's always multitasking, and I definitely appreciate him as well. So you will see this uploaded on YouTube in a day or two, so you can share it that way, and it's like the remix to the book, we'll call it. So thank you again. My name's Nzinga. I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you. Have a
Good
good
night.
Thank you.
Great night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, wow.
Yay.
Oh, I just want to congratulate Miss Penn and Miss Gilliam. I mean, all the accomplishments, the ceilings they have cracked, and it's just so inspiring, and we're just so proud. I just am so happy that you're here to share in person, and that we're able to tell our friends and have them watch the video, because this is just awesome. And then Melanie, she was the perfect one to be a part of that project, because she loves Black people.
Yes.
And it just shows, it just shows.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
just so inspired. I bought the book for my son for Father's Day, but now I want my copy, so. And
Got
some
you
other,
covered, Mom.
wow, oh, thanks so much for coming. It was just such a joy to hear you telling those stories.
Oh.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you. And the book is great. I just, when I went through it, it was just wonderful. So, all right, I'm going to get off and get on my next Zoom. And
All right.
Dorothy, I'm a real fan of yours. Sort of
Thank you so
yield
much.
to your comments. So it's so wonderful to be on with you this evening. Of the Post, I always look for your columns and your stories. So
Thank you. You're really very kind, and I'm very, very impressed with you and your work as well. So it's a pleasure to meet you.
thank you. All right, goodbye. I'm going to my next
Yeah.
Zoom. Bye.
Okay,
Thanks
bye-bye.
so much. Bye-bye. Wow. Wow.